Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure to welcome everybody to this Laudato Si inspired biodiversity webinar, The Road to COP15. This webinar is being translated into 4 languages, French, Spanish, Portuguese, and Italian. To listen to the interpreters, click on the interpretation, the globe icon, along the bottom of your Zoom screen, and then select your language of preference. Este seminario está siendo traducido a 4 lenguas, francés, español, portugués e italiano. Para escuchar a los intérpretes, por favor, den clic en la opción de interpretación que tienen abajo en sus pantallas de Zoom y seleccionen su lengua de preferencia. Este webinar está siendo traducido en 4 idiomas, francés, español, português e italiano. Para ouvir os intérpretes, clique no ícone da interpretação ao longo da parte inferior da sua janela e depois selecione a língua de preferência. I would like to begin by acknowledging the diverse land and seas where we are gathered from this webinar across the globe and pay my respects to the indigenous custodians where our feet meet the earth for this special gathering. My name is Susana Espinosa Soto. I come from Ecuador, South America. I have worked in the Amazon region, especially with indigenous peoples, since 2016. First, coordinating the ecclesial mapping process of the socio-environmental conditions of this huge region for REPAM, the regional ecclesial Pan-Amazonian body. I am currently in charge of a project to mitigate the effects of COVID-19 with the Amazon communities from the public health perspective at the Catholic University in Ecuador in partnership with the Jesuit universities of Latin America. Now, I'd like to extend a special welcome to our guest of honor, Cardinal Peter Turkson and Dr. Jane Goodall, who will be leading the dialogue as keynote speakers later on. During the presentations, I invite you to place your questions, the questions you may have, in the Q&A text box you can access by clicking on the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And now, as it is our custom, we invite you to join us for a short prayer. Let us begin by closing our eyes, focus on our breathing, and allow ourselves to tune into your body being fully present in this moment. Let us begin by closing our eyes, focus on our breathing, and allow ourselves to tune into our bodies being fully present in this moment. We will feel the power of an intense, hopeful gaze that will accompany us during this dialogue. I invite you to watch a short video followed by Laudato Si's prayer.
There is hope in our eyes when we truly see each other, like the light around this storm. We are not afraid of the dark, 'cause there is hope in our hearts. And every single beat we feel it to the ends of the earth. Our echo carries on. We are sacred, we are strong. We are beautiful, we belong. Please hear our unheard song. There is hope in our voice when we listen to each other. Barriers disappear with every story told. We are sacred, we are strong. We are beautiful, we belong. Please hear our unheard song.
Please, if you could share the screen of the Laudato Si prayer, or allow me to do it so. Thank you. All-powerful God, you are present in the whole universe and in the smallest of your creatures. You embrace with your tenderness all that exists. Pour out upon us the power of your love, that we may protect life and beauty. Fill us with peace, that we may live as brothers and sisters, harming no one. O God of the poor, help us to rescue the abandoned and forgotten of this earth, so precious in your eyes. Bring healing to our lives, that we may protect the world and not prey on it, that we may sow beauty, not pollution and destruction. Touch the hearts of those who look only for gain, at the expense of the poor and the earth. Teach us to discover the worth of each thing, to be filled with awe and contemplation, to recognize that we are profoundly united with every creature as we journey towards your infinite light. We thank you for being with us each day. Encourage us, we pray, in our struggle for justice, love, and peace. Amen. Thank you very much. We could. Now I have the honor of introducing His Eminence Cardinal Peter K.A. Turkson, Prefect of the Dicastery for Promoting Integral Human Development. Cardinal Turkson was born in Ghana. He has a Master in Divinity at St. Anthony-on-Hudson, New York. He was ordained a priest in 1975. He got his doctorate in Sacred Scripture at the Pontifical Biblical Institute in Rome in 1992. The same year, he was appointed Archbishop and then, in 2003, elevated to Cardinal by Pope John Paul II. In 2009, he was the General Speaker at the Second Special Assembly for Africa of the Synod of Bishops, and then Pope Benedict XVI appointed him as president of the Pontifical Council for Justice and Peace. In 2013, Pope Francis confirmed him as head of the Pontifical Council for Justice and Peace, and in 2016 appointed him as the first prefect of the new Dicastery for Promoting Integral Human Development. Cardinal Turkson played a key role in the preparation for the dissemination of Pope Francis's encyclical Laudato Si. Your Eminence, you may start.
Thank you. Thank you for your kind words of introduction. And all of you participants at these events, I can see all your faces, so I may not be able to have addressed you sufficiently well as I should, but know that whatever your status is, it's recognized. And so let me generally say, brothers and sisters, and all of you participants at this event, we bring you warm greetings from the Dicastery for Promoting Human Development of the Vatican. And on its behalf, we wish this webinar great success, especially for it's the way it goes to prepare for COP15 coming up on biodiversity. So, dear friends, as you know, in this webinar, we'll be focusing on biodiversity, and we shall examine 2 points which are very closely related: the current context of multifaceted crisis and the safeguarding of biodiversity. And the two are important and in a way are very closely related, as observed, because in October 2020, the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services reported that the same human actions which drive biodiversity loss have also resulted in an increase in pandemics. So the relationship between the two is very significant and very important for us to note in this webinar. So just over a year ago, we experienced the first shock wave of COVID-19 virus, and it has since led to a collapse of the world economy and several other social structures on which our lives depend. The economic crisis has further widened the gap that already existed between the rich and the poor, and has brought and revealed the poor access to health care for certain populations and sectors of our society. So as Pope Francis has said, one pandemic has revealed several other social pandemics, which all have been brought to our attention and caused us to take a look at. So given that COVID-19 is a zoonotic disease, the current pandemic alerts us to the fact that when nature is sick, humanity itself is very sick. And indeed, if you want, Pope Benedict XVI wrote about this already in 2009 in his encyclical letter Caritas in Veritate, and he says that the way humanity treats the environment influences also the way that it treats itself, and vice versa. This invites contemporary society to a serious review of its lifestyles, which in very many parts are hedonism and consumerism. Indeed, none of these elements in our creation are independent variables. They affect each other, and so the disregard and abuse of one necessarily affects the other component of our society. So the health of humanity then depends on that of nature. If nature is sick as a result of human caused or human-centered pollution and destruction, then humanity also invariably suffers. This shows that everything is interconnected and that the ecological crisis, which whatever its origins are have very serious related with anthropological crisis, a sense of the human person, its own conduct and behavior. For us here in the Vatican, and indeed for all of us, we need to recognize that the Judeo-Christian tradition draws on the wisdom of sacred scripture to recognize the diversity of living beings and the gift of all flesh and matter in creation. Indeed, the creation accounts in the first chapters of Genesis make it clear that at creation, life was diverse. Biodiversity took its form right from the beginning of creation. It wasn't only Adam, the human species that God created, but it created the animals, the birds, the insects, and everything that existed. So we need to take note of that. In the Bible, then, biodiversity is recognized as the form that the creation takes. In the social teachings subsequently of the church, biodiversity is recognized as the ongoing work of God's creation, a sacred gift from God. And each creature has an intrinsic value and worth on that account, and a purpose known to God. Every creature reveals God to us and is a manifestation of God's own glory. Those who are used to reading scriptures and the Psalms will recognize that this is an occasion for God's praise. And for example, in Psalm 19 and Psalm 104 will deepen this for us. Today, there is a devastating deconstruction of God's gift of creation. The biodiversity on Earth's genetic species and ecosystems are crying out to us for help. In Laudato Si of Pope Francis, the statement is almost a very regular that two things are crying out to us for help: the poor and creation itself. Each year sees the disappearance of thousands of plants and animal species, which we will never know, and which our children will never see because they have been lost forever. This constitutes a huge ecological debt for us. The cost of the damage caused by human exploitation of nature is much greater than the economic benefits that are obtained. Where certain species are destroyed or seriously harmed, the values involved are incalculable. The extinction of mammals, of birds, is visible. But there are numerous other species generally unseen which also go destroyed. Fungi, algae, invertebrates, insects, plants, reptiles, even to undersea corals. All of these go lost when our conduct and treatment of nature gets abusive. For ethical, moral, and theological reasons, it is incumbent upon us to safeguard the biodiversity on Earth. Globally, a framework for safeguarding biodiversity has been provided by the International Convention of Biological Diversity. The Convention on Biological Diversity recognizes the need for a multi-sectoral and transversal approach to ensure the conservation and sustainability of biological diversity. It is true that biodiversity exists in different strengths and different quantities in different parts of the world. In the tropical and the equatorial area, in the big forest area, biodiversity is far richer in some other areas, like in the desert areas and all of that. That recognition is there. So is it also related sometimes with even temperature diversities on different phases of the earth. But it is important that we recognize their crucial existence and their crucial value and character for life on our planet. Now, the 15th conference of the parties to the Convention on Biological Diversity, which will be held very soon, has as vision a world living in harmony with nature, where by 2050, biodiversity is valued, conserved, restored, and wisely used, maintaining an ecosystem services sustaining a healthy planet, and delivering benefits essential for all people. Biodiversity is related with ecosystems, but they are not the same. They're two distinct things, interrelated, but not interchangeable. Four goals then are the focus. The first being increase the area protected so that the biodiversity can be assured in its interconnectivity and its integrity. With a natural ecosystem supporting healthy and resilient populations of all species, and the reduction of the number and to reduce the number of species that are threatened. Second goal, value nature's contribution to people, to maintain and enhance it through conservation and sustainable use, supporting global development agenda for the benefit of all people. Third goal, share fairly and equitably the benefits from the utilization of genetic resources. And fourthly, and the final goal, to check the means of implementation to achieve all of these goals and the targets related to them. Therefore, the task assigned to all of us is to reflect and to find ways to meet these challenges. The church always raises a prophetic voice to provide a spiritual basis for reflection on the protection of the poor, and this includes the Earth's biodiversity and its ecosystems. You all know how much the voice of Pope Francis is resonated on this. And you all know how much from this point of view and relating himself with St. Francis of Assisi is related life forms biodiversity, even to the universal call to praise God. And indeed, based on this role, Pope Francis, like St. Francis of Assisi, talks about the universal fraternity of humanity. And this not simply because we are interconnected and related one to another, but it's also because we all come together as one species to praise God for the great work of creation. So the church claims that humans are responsible for looking after nature. This comes from Genesis. When at creation, God charged Adam to till and to keep. To till was to make the earth productive. To keep was to ensure that the earth maintains its productive qualities and traits to support life all the time. Human beings must therefore respect the laws of nature and its delicate equilibrium existing between creatures and the world itself. This imperative for care also extends to the teaching about resting on the Sabbath day, which is for human beings also to preserve creation. Indeed, from the book of Deuteronomy, related with the book of Genesis, Sabbath has a sense of liberation, has the sense of giving respite and rest to any other system, any system that is oppressed and that lives in bondage. Protecting the for biodiversity is primarily a human task. God directs us to till and to keep the
Jane, you may start. Sorry,
Doctor, you have to unmute your microphone.
Okay, they said they do it for me. Okay, well, hello, everybody. And I was saying it's a great honor for me to be asked to say some words during this webinar. And because we're here to discuss biodiversity, and I suspect that most of the people listening are human beings, maybe there's a few dogs and cats in people's houses, but let me bring the voice of the wild to start off with. That's in chimpanzee. Hello, this is me, Jane. I did indeed spend many years studying our closest living relatives. We know now that we share 98.6% of our DNA with them. And during that time, I learned a great deal. And one of the things that I learned was, yes, we're similar in so many ways. We kiss, embrace, hold hands, pat one another. We can go to war. We can show love and compassion and altruism. We can use tools. We can have cultures, but we're different. And when I'm forced to think of how we're different, it's our intellect has developed explosively from that of our closest living relatives. Yes, they and other animals are way more intelligent than people used to think. But we designed a rocket that went up to Mars, from which a little robot has crawled around taking photographs. And we don't want to go and live on Mars. At one time, it was thought it might support life. But we've got this one beautiful green and blue planet, planet Earth, created by God. How is it possible that the most intellectual creature to ever walk on this planet is destroying its only home? You all know we're going through pretty dark times. And let me pick up on the pandemic that has already been discussed, because it's caused so much suffering around the world, everywhere. But you know, the sad thing is, as was alluded to, we brought it in large part on ourselves by our absolute disrespect of animals and our disrespect of the natural world. How so? Well, as we destroy environment, habitat after habitat, and as we cause the extinction of species after species, the animals remaining in the habitats remaining are forced closer very often to humans. Humans invade their territory. And in addition to that, they're hunted and eaten. They're captured alive. They or their body parts are trafficked around the world to be sold in wildlife markets everywhere for food, for medicine, for clothing, and for pets. And in these conditions, which are usually unhygienic, crowded, and cruel, it's relatively easy for a pathogen, such as a virus, to spill over from one animal to one person, where it may bond with a cell in that human and create a new disease, such as the pandemic we're suffering from now, COVID-19. And such a pandemic has been predicted for a very, very long time by those studying these zoonotic diseases. So in addition to wildlife markets and all the other ways that we're treating animals, there are factory farms, industrial animal agriculture, creating terrible conditions. And again, many zoonotic diseases, not all of them infectious, come from animals in factory farms in different parts of the world. So that's the problem that we've created for ourselves. And the same disrespect of the natural world has led to climate change, and climate change is one of the major factors affecting biodiversity that we're here to discuss. So what do we have to do? Actually, you and me, what must we do to avert this disaster, this looming disaster? I mean, I truly believe we've got a window of time when, if we get together and take action, we can save the future for our children and for planet Earth, or the life forms on planet Earth. but we do have to take action. So what actions can we take? One, we need to reduce the unsustainable lifestyle of so many hundreds and thousands of us on this planet who have way more than we need, very often more than we want. We have to think about the choices we make each day. We go to the supermarket to buy food. Let's ask ourselves, where did it come from? Did its production harm the environment? Was it cruel to animals? Is it cheap because of unequitable wages in other parts of the world? And if the answer is yes, yes, and yes, don't buy it. Oh, well, if we buy this so-called organic food, people say, it's going to cost us more. Yes, it will cost a little bit more until more people buy it, but that means we'll value it more and waste less. And the waste of food around the world, the millions of tons of food wasted when there are millions of people who go to bed without even one good square meal. These are the kind of things we have to change. We have to eliminate poverty. And it came to me with a big rush when I flew over the little Gombe National Park where I studied the chimps in 1990. In 1960, that little park was part of a great forest that stretched right across Africa. By 1990, I looked down on a small island of forest surrounded by completely bare hills, with more people living there than the land could support. Farmland overused and infertile, trees cut down even on the steep slopes of the valley by people desperate to find more land to grow food to feed their families. And these people were struggling to survive. And that's when it hit me. If we don't help these people find ways of living without destroying the environment, we can't save chimpanzees, forests, or anything else. And that's when we started the program alluded to, Take Care, or TOCARI as we call it, which is the Jane Goodall Institute's method of community-based conservation. From the very beginning, working very closely hand in hand with the local communities. It's a very holistic program, no time to go into it, but it requires restoring fertility to the overused land without pesticides, without agricultural chemicals. It requires water management programs. Then there are scholarships to keep girls in school and microfinance based on the Grameen Bank of my great hero, Muhammad Yunus, so that villagers, particularly women, can take out a small loan and start their own small environmentally sustainable business. And also putting into the hands of the local people the tools with which they can actually monitor the health of their own village forest reserves. And this program has helped people to understand that we protect the environment, not just for wildlife, but for their own future, because we need wildlife, we need the environment. It provides us with clean air and clean water, and we depend on it so much for everything. And what we depend on is healthy ecosystems. And I like to see an ecosystem as a tapestry of life, composed, as Cardinal Turkson said, of this diversity of animal and plant species, all interrelated, each little species having a role to play in this tapestry of life. And so I see it as one of these species becomes extinct, it tears a hole in that tapestry. And as more and more holes are torn, as these species become extinct with horrifying rapidity, in the end, we're going to be left with a tapestry so torn that the ecosystem will collapse. And that is what we depend on for our lives. So, yes. So fortunately, there are more and more NGOs and people working to conserve wildlife. People who understand that we're part of the natural world, and people who begin to understand we must change. We cannot have this continuing tearing of this tapestry of life, this God-given, amazing planet of ours. One thing we have to do, of course, as everybody knows, we have to move away from our reckless burning of fossil fuel and move into more renewable energy, solar, wind, tide, and so on. And as I've said, the one thing that makes us more different from any other animal is this explosive development of our intellect. As the dire situation of the planet becomes better known, so more and more of these brilliant brains of our scientists and others are creating technologies that help us to live in greater harmony with the natural world. And of course, we as individuals are learning to think about our own ecological footprints. We do have to phase out industrial agriculture. This idea that a monoculture is the only way to feed growing populations simply isn't true. And as Cardinal Turkson said, we have to support small-scale family farms. We have to support permaculture and regenerative agriculture, because this monoculture, this industrial agriculture, is covering our food with poison. These chemical poisons, the pesticides, the herbicides, the fungicides, and it's bad for our health. That's becoming increasingly apparent, although the multinational giant corporations are doing their best to suppress these facts. They're finally emerging that people are getting sick from these pesticides and herbicides, but it's destroying the soil. We depend on the soil. There's so much life under our feet that we're only just beginning to learn about. And it's the soil which nurtures healthy ecosystems. We must not go on destroying the soil. And it's particularly important to end this factory farming. Billions of animals right now around the world are kept in horrific conditions. And it's not only the cruelty that's involved. These billions of animals have to be fed. Huge areas are cleared to grow the grain. Masses of fossil fuel in the huge machines, and that grain must be transported to the animals to the abattoir, and the meat to the table. And then, in addition to that, water is becoming increasingly scarce because of climate change in some parts of the world. And water is used so wastefully to change vegetable to animal protein. And then all of these animals in their digestive processes produce a gas, and that gas is methane. And along with carbon dioxide is one of the greenhouse gases that circle the planet and trap the heat of the sun, leading to heated temperatures, which cause these terrible changes in weather patterns, the hurricanes and the flooding, and all of these disasters that harm people, but also reduce in loss of biodiversity. And I must say this, we must remember that in these factory farms, in these wildlife markets, every single animal is an individual. Every single animal has its own personality. Many of them are highly intelligent, like pigs. All of them feel fear, terror, despair, and pain. It says somewhere in the Bible that God notices when one single sparrow dies. I wonder what God thinks of what we're doing, the unbelievable suffering we're causing to all these millions of sentient beings around the world. And then finally, there's the future generation, the generation whose future we have been stealing for years and years and years. And now this new generation, learning more about what we're doing to the planet, is rising up in an amazing way to tackle the problems that we've created for their future. And this is why I started our program, Roots and Shoots, which involves young people from kindergarten through university. And there are hundreds and thousands of young people who are in or who have been through this program. I think it's so successful. It's in more than 60 countries, and we partner with many, many other like-minded youth groups. But Roots and Shoots is about young people choosing their own projects. The requirement is choose projects that help 1 people, 2 animals, 3 environment, so that the group as a whole will be tackling all these 3 different projects, or maybe 1 big project that puts them all together. And of course, yes, planting trees. All of our roots and shoots groups all around the world are planting trees. And we're part of the Trillion Tree Challenge that was issued at Davos last year. And so the young people are facing this uncertain future because of our actions and the actions of our forebears. And it's up to us to support them. It's up to us to inspire them to listen to their voices. And I'm talking about children everywhere, the children of the indigenous people. And yes, we can learn, and we're learning from indigenous people and sharing that knowledge with children from America and Europe and other such places. We do need to get together. We do need to work together. If we care at all about the health of planet Earth, our mother, and about the future of our own great-great-grandchildren. So the young people are my greatest reason for hope. They care about animals. They understand about animals. And everywhere I go, like when I was last in China, people came up and said, but of course I care about animals. I was in Roots and Shoots in primary school. This is happening all over the world. So these young children, whose future, as I say, we have blighted, we owe it to them. We owe it to them to try and repay some of the damage that we've done, to work together and to take hope from the fact that the young people have all this energy and passion and commitment, that nature is so kind. So give nature a chance and she will come back and clothe again places that we have destroyed. And there's this amazing brain that we've been gifted with, which is beginning to work for good. And finally, what I call the indomitable human spirit, the people who tackle projects that seem absolutely impossible and won't give up. So together, we can create this better future where animals and nature are valued and respected as they should be, not just because of what they do for us, but because of who they are in their own right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jane Goodall, for your important remarks and for inviting us to take action on a daily basis in this window of hope we have as humanity. And thank you, of course, for sharing this time, your time with us. Participants, I would like to remind you to place your questions on the chat box. And now I will hand over to Jackie Raymond to moderate the Q&A dialogue. Jackie is a co-founder of the Global Catholic Climate Movement and is currently working with the Vatican Dicastery for Integral Human Development as joint coordinator of the Ecology Task Force for Pope Francis's Vatican COVID Commission, and is Laudato Si consultant at Australian Catholic University.
Thank you so much, Susanna. Thanks for being such a great moderator. And thank you to Cardinal Turkson and to Dr. Jane for your inspiring input, your sobering message, and your incredible spirit, your commitment that's inspiring us all. Thank you to everybody for your questions. They've been streaming in on the chat line. We've received many, and unfortunately we won't have time for them all, so we'll fit in as many as we can. We have questions coming through in various languages, so Susanna will also moderate this. The first question I have is for Cardinal Turkson, and it's in relation to the role of the Vatican in COP15. So people are wondering, what role will the Vatican play in the lead up to and at COP15?
Well, the role of the Vatican can, indeed, it's already started. It's not even can, but the role of the Vatican is playing right now. It's already been, in the first place, a related issue to the thoughts that are expressed in the encyclical letter Laudato Si, which invites us to recognize that the systems of nature are crying to us for help. And the systems of nature crying to us for because they are abuses. At the beginning of that encyclical, the Pope tells us that the violence that is within the human heart, Dr. Goodall expresses all of that as, greed and all kinds of habits we have. But the Pope says the violence that is within the human heart, these are what are manifested in all the things that are around us, in our soil, in our rivers, in our climate, in everything. So the role of the Vatican is first and foremost raising awareness, creating consciousness, and then inviting people to submit to an education in ecological citizenship. Ecological citizenship education, and this is very, very crucial. Dr. Goddard talked about having a center through which so very many have passed. But it is so very important for us to recognize that we need to recognize what it means to be an ecological citizen. We exist and inhabit this world together with several other members. And it is our living together that makes everything possible. So we cannot play the master and the master of anything that exists to the extinction or the destruction of other elements. And then concretely also stimulate parishes to undertake concrete actions like the Laudato Si Chapel, the gardens, solar panel on roofs, the birthday system in Poland of celebrating birthday by planting trees. Several such local initiatives and habits also help to restore the environment.
Thank you, Cardinal Turkson. Susanna has a question from a Spanish speaker now.
Yes, the question says, in addition to action in our family core, changing habits, how else can we change pollution? Since a large part of our population depends on agriculture and forestry to sustain their families in the basin. Dr. Jane, this is a question for you. Sorry, your mic is closed.
Somebody else mutes my mic, not me. Anyway, so the answer is we have to do agriculture, yes. We have to feed people, yes, but not in such a way that is destroying the very land on which we depend for our food. And so we have to work with nature. And there are so many projects now that prove that working with nature delivers more food. And so there's permaculture, there's agroforestry, there's small-scale family farming, there's regenerative agriculture. And in all these ways, we are working in collaboration with nature to provide us with food. At the same time, we're not destroying biodiversity. And that is the way that we simply have to go. And so many good brains are working on it now. And also, there are now ways of controlling for pests without these terrible chemicals that are causing the deaths of honeybees, on whom we defend to pollinate much of the food that we eat and depend on. So that's what we have to do, and we're bright enough to find ways of doing it.
Thank you, Dr. Jane. Cardinal Turkson, a question for you regarding perhaps an aspirational question. Will Pope Francis and the Vatican consider calling for a global ecumenical council, a Vatican III, to plan implementation efforts in response to the call of Laudato Si to reverse and stop climate change and protect biodiversity? What do you think? I know it's speculative, but I think it's a very inspiring question to ask.
Yes, it is. It certainly is. But difficult for me to say yes or no or to answer right away. But knowing Pope Francis and his response to concrete response to everything that is happening around us, I will not put this beyond him. But at the same time, I cannot confirm that something like that can happen. I know. I mean, from his interest in organizing the Amazon Synod was not simply the thing about a geographical region, but was an occasion for him to invite us to recognize all the three big areas in the world which have similar features. So the Amazon, the Congo Basin, and the Indonesia-Philippine Basin, and to invite us to create a network, okay, that can involve the church in taking care of all of these places. So this can be suggested. In fact, probably the good answer to see will be this can be suggested to the Holy Father at the next session that our dicaster may have with him for his consideration and thought.
Thank you so much. That's very wonderful to hear. And another question that relates to it is in regard to the planning that perhaps Pope Francis could put into something like a synodal process to implement Laudato Si at the archdiocesan and diocesan and parish levels globally, that could provide structure and involvement of the church's hierarchy, religious, lay, ecumenical, to reverse and stop climate change and protect biodiversity. I think this might relate, Cardinal Turkson, to the Laudato Si action platform and the plans for 7-year plans as a way in which this can be implemented. But the question is really about asking, can there be a planning stage for a council that Pope Francis could call us into a synodal process around? It's a continuation of the last question, really.
I think if the Pope did decide to organize a meeting or a synod or a ecumenical council like that, it certainly will have a planning stage. Almost every synod, if you want, go through 3 basic planning stages or processes. First, when the theme is identified, then it is thrown to the local church for their input. From their input, we have the preparation of what we call lineamenta, kind of guidelines, and then again another consultation takes place. Out of the consultation are filtered several crucial issues, or if you want, convergence points, which then go into the documents which will guide the actual holding of the synod. We call that the instrumental laboris, or the working instrument, or the working paper. So indeed, if the Pope were, again, all of this is suggestion, thinking, and discussing with the Pope. If he decided to do anything like this, these stages will go through. Local churches will have a chance to express themselves. Diocesan churches will have a chance to express, and bishops and all of these entities and different constituencies will have a way of feeding into the content of the synod.
Lovely. Thanks so much for explaining that for us all. It's really helpful when we think through the processes of church from the perspective of these questions on biodiversity. A question for you, Dr. Jane. We're aware, of course, of the multinational companies and corporates that are producing many things that continue to destroy our beautiful creation. Can we work together to look for alternatives and suggest practical solutions for ordinary people who want to make a difference in the world? What do you think about that question?
Oh, I'm not muted this time. Thank you. So let me say that ordinary people can and have made a big difference, and it's called consumer pressure. So I talked about going and buying things that are produced sustainably and without cruelty. And when people don't buy those things, then the companies begin to wake up. There's been huge change in many of the big corporations, and many of them are now working very hard to make sure that their supply chain is ethical. There have been big changes in banning the sale of fur in fashion and even reptile skins. And I've seen so much change. You know, I've probably lived Probably not many people listening are much older than me. I just entered my 88th year. And gosh, I've seen so much change. And I do want to say, before you turn to the next question, that one of my reasons for hope is Pope Francis, because in that position as Pope, with the whole of the Catholic Church around the world, his stand on the environment really has made a big difference. And the other reason for hope is that the other religions too are beginning to talk about the environment more and more. And so this really is one of the big hopes for our future. And that more and more scientists, and I never thought I'd live to see this day, but the scientists are coming together to agree that there is intelligence, and I'm giving intelligence a capital I, behind the creation of the universe.
Thank you, Dr. Jane, and thank you for reminding us of this call for unity amongst all the faiths of the world in this work. It's really together in protecting the biodiversity and all of the ecosystem's values that we will get somewhere. So thank you for that. I'd like now to invite Susanna to ask one question, and then we'll need to close. Our time, unfortunately, has run way shorter than the number of questions that we've received, and certainly this has been recorded. We'll be sharing it. It is being live streamed as well. And we'll have some closing remarks from Father Jostrom. So first, Susanna, what's your final question to Dr. Jane or Cardinal Turkson?
Yes, we have a question in Italian for Dr. Jane that says, if we only emphasize in the defense of nature, isn't there a risk of not being listened to? What are your thoughts on this? This has a context of...
Isn't there a risk of what, did you say?
Of not being listened to, if we only defend the creation, like in general.
Well, I think it depends on how we talk about it. And, you know, I've always found the very best way of talking about something is telling stories. I think it's really important that we get firsthand knowledge of what's going on around the world, and then we can speak from the heart and speak of what we know and what we feel, and not just provide statistics and numbers, which some scientists do. And I consider myself more of a naturalist. And by the way, I've seen a lot of questions flashing in saying, how do we get involved in Roots and Shoots? So I want to say janegoodall.org is the main website. Rootsandshoots.org tells you how to take part. And I would like every person listening who has or knows children of any age to try and get involved. Why? Because it's changing lives. I get thousands of messages from young people who say their lives have been changed by this program.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jane.
Thank you. Thanks so much. It's been wonderful to have this Q&A session and the dialogue together. I'd like now to shine a light on the actions, the call to action that we're hearing and the questions that are echoing these calls. So as well as the personal actions that we're being encouraged to take, we can see that we're on a path this year with multiple key global events. We have the Global Food Summit this year, we have COP15, and we've got COP26 on climate in November. We're moving towards the Laudato Si week in our church. We celebrate this from the 17th of May through to the 24th of May, which will be the 6th anniversary of Laudato Si arriving and being released to us. And in the frame of that Laudato Si week celebrations, we will be highlighting, of course, biodiversity on the 22nd of May, the International Day for Biological Diversity. And in Laudato Si week, we'll also be launching a Catholic petition. The Catholic petition, if you sign up to receive the information about Laudato Si week, you'll be the first to hear about this Catholic petition, which will include the calls for biodiversity protection as well as climate change action. And of course, after Laudato Si Week, we'll be moving towards these big global events, and there'll be a range of things that you'll be invited to participate in, to take action at the local level, to add your voice to all of these voices that are being raised up to contribute to a flourishing biodiversity and a healthier world for us all. So in saying a few comments about the actions and the way forward, I would now like to introduce Father Joshua Carethodum, who is the coordinator of the ecology sector at the Dicastery promoting integral human development and the coordinator of the ecology task force that is a key group within the Vatican COVID Commission. Father Joshua, thank you for joining us for this webinar, for supporting all the work that we do and that you do on biodiversity, climate, food, and all these other areas. Would you like to say a few concluding remarks for us today?
Thank you, Jackie. And wow, what a beautiful webinar we have had. I would like to say just 3 words. First of all, Laudato Si, praise and thanks. Thanks to our eminent speakers this morning, His Eminence Cardinal Peter Turkson, Dr. Jane Goodall, and so ably moderated by Susanna and Jackie. So thanks to all of you once again. Also like to thank Father Emmanuel Vaicuno, the head of the biodiversity desk at our dicastery, who along with Jackie Remo, they and along with many others, the great team they had, they put together this webinar. So thanks to all of them. The second word that rang in my mind, listening to Dr. Jane and this eminence, and also to the questions that we were put, was about the challenge. And this morning I got up with remembering Deuteronomy 30:19. God says, I'm placing a choice before you. Choose life or death. And the Lord adds, choose life so that you and your children may live. Scientists tell us that out of 8 million species, by the end of the century, 1 million species could disappear. What an important critical choice awaiting us. We could either write the obituary of so many species, or we can restore the earth, restore life, which is also the theme of the Earth Day that we'll be celebrating within a couple of days on 22nd of April, restoring the earth. And as Dr. Jane said, this very big choice then gets spelled out in so many little choices that we are going to make every day, from food to agriculture, from energy to transportation, in all walks of life. So this is the challenge, to choose life or death. The third word is the one of hope. There is hope because we are seeing partnerships, intergenerational, old and young people, inter-religious, intergeographical, at so many levels. And partnership is the way. And that's what is really giving us hope. I'd also like to thank all those who partnered with us to organize this webinar. Please allow me to mention them very briefly. Apart from the Dicastery, the COVID-19 Commission, and the ecology sector within the Dicastery, then we had the Jane Goodall Institute. So thank you very much for joining us. Then the GCCM, REBAC, RAOEN, CIDSE, CYNESA, USG, UISG, ISVUMI, Columbans, Listen, and especially, these were church partners, but we have had also Yale Forum on Religion and Ecology and the Parliament of the World's Religions. So allow me to conclude on a note of hope that this partnership is happening, and let's allow this partnership, this movement of people from below, to be led by young people and to be led by indigenous communities who are the custodians of biodiversity. So thank you very much for joining us. Laudato Si, let's choose life and let's do it in partnership. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Father Josh. Thank you, everybody. We're concluding now with the logos of the partners who have put on this fantastic webinar. We thank you all for your participation, for your generosity of attention and questions, for your input. Thanks to our wonderful speakers, our moderators, and over and out. Good night. Have a good day. Bye now. God bless.